Welcome back to Ranch Beat, where every country song has a story and we tell it. I'm James, and today we're pulling apart one of those songs that reads like a short myth, Pancho and Lefty.
And I'm Sam, ready to add the history, the facts, and the parts most folks don't know. Let's roll into it.
Here's the hook. The writer who wrote this song, Townes Van Zandt, never wanted the spotlight the way others did. Yet his ballad about an outlaw and his betrayer became a mainstream hit when Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard recorded it together. That flip from intimate poem to chartered duet is the kind of tension that makes music history sticky. Quick overview before we dig in. Pancho and Lefty was written by Townes Van Zandt. It first appeared on one of his records in the early 1970s as a quiet storytelling piece. The most famous cover came from Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard in 1983, and that version brought the song to the country charts and a much wider audience. One-line vibe, a spare, elegiac outlaw ballad that reads like a parable.
So let's set the scene. Townes came out of the Texas songwriter tradition, a place where poetry and country intersect. His work sits beside Guy Clark, Townes' contemporaries, and the whole scene fed into what we now call Americana, or outlaw storytelling. In the late 60s and 70s, country music was splitting, one branch polished for radio, another rooted in folk and raw narrative. Townes lived firmly in the storytelling branch. That context matters. Pancho and Lefty isn't just a song about criminals. It's part of a long American tradition of ballads that mythologize characters, the same family as classic murder ballads and frontier tales. Townes wrote like a poet and a road-worn observer, and that voice carried a different authority than a Nashville single.
Listen to the opening lines and you feel it. Not just a scene, but a world. Pancho was a bandit, a figure who could be larger than life. Lefty is quieter, almost confessional. There's this economy. Townes gives you a handful of images and lets the imagination stitch the rest. That economy is why the song reads like myth rather than gossip.
Okay, let's walk the lyrics in a practical way. The title pairs two names, which is a classic ballad move. Pancho carries the outlaw edge and cross-border imagery. Lefty suggests a nickname, a history, a fallibility. The core narrative is simple. Pancho roams, Pancho meets a fate, Lefty goes on to live a quieter but haunted life. Buyers and listeners read betrayal into it, who turned on whom, and that ambiguity is deliberate.
There's a line that kills me every time, and that's the story of Pancho and Lefty. It's almost a shrug toward the myth. We tell ourselves these stories because we need them. Townes layers in hints, a border crossing, a rumor of betrayal, a late-night painting of solitude, and never fully explains. That tension between what we know and what we imagine is the emotional engine.
Interpretations vary. Some hear politics, a comment on borders or on fame. Most hear something simpler and older, loyalty and its collapse. Importantly, Townes rarely offered precise backstories. He preferred parable and image, which kept covers and listeners hungry to fill gaps.
Now, let's credit the people behind the sound. Townes Van Zandt wrote the song and recorded it several times in intimate arrangements, usually just him and a guitar. These recordings were quiet, conversational, like someone telling a story across a kitchen table. Townes himself wasn't chasing mainstream success. He cared more about the song's honesty.
When Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard stepped in, everything shifted. Willie brought his relaxed, nasal phrasing and an aura of myth. Merle added that worn, lived-in baritone. The production on their duet tightened the arrangement just enough to make the narrative feel cinematic without overwhelming it. Session players added tasteful fills, pedal steel, a gentle bass line, subtle acoustic rhythm that pushed the ballad into radio territory.
Here's where it gets interesting. Townes' original was a private thing. The Nelson-Haggard duet turned it public. Suddenly, the story belonged to a new audience, and with that came reinterpretation. Some critics argued the duet smoothed over the darker edges. Others say it amplified the song's legend. Both points are true, and that tug is part of its power.
Let's talk drama and a few fun facts. There's a persistent rumor that the duet single changed Townes' life, that it brought him money and recognition he hadn't had before. It's true to an extent. The cover opened doors and introduced people to his catalog, but Townes' relationship with fame was complicated. He didn't always welcome the spotlight, and some of the commercial attention felt mismatched with his fragile, private nature.
There are studio anecdotes worth noting. Willie reportedly loved the song for its storytelling. Merle came into the session with a real sense of character for Lefty, and their vocal back and forth creates a dialogue that the original solo recording doesn't have. The label saw a single and pushed for release. Fans and radio responded, and the song climbed charts it never would have touched in its stripped-down form.
Another neat detail, the duet's harmony choices. Willie tends to float above the melody, Merle anchors. That contrast echoes the song's characters, Pancho's mythic sway versus Lefty's grounded regret. Instrumentally, producers kept things sparse, a patient guitar, a mournful steel, and room for the lyrics to breathe. That's smart producing. You give space to the story.
For listeners who aren't musicians, here's what matters. Sparse arrangements put the lyrics front and center. When you remove layers, the listener becomes an active partner, imagining the world around the words. Townes' version invites that intimacy. The duet invites a shared experience, more communal, almost like a campfire retelling that everyone sings along to.
And the legacy? Pancho and Lefty is in that small group of songs that belong to multiple worlds, the songwriter's quiet world and the commercial country world. It taught us something about how songs travel, how a piece written in a cheap motel room or a tiny Texas apartment can carry its truth into big studios and stadiums without losing soul.
Why does it endure? Because it holds a truth about storytelling. Ambiguity keeps a song alive. You can argue about who betrayed whom. You can point to real historical echoes. But at the core, we respond to the ache of loss and the pull of myth. Next time you hear the chorus, you'll hear more than melody. You'll hear the choices a songwriter made to leave room for you.
Before we wrap, one small listening note. Listen for the way the duet breathes between lines. Those tiny pauses, a held note, a soft inhale, make the story feel lived in. Producers and players didn't try to dress up the song. They honored its space. That's why both versions matter. They show two ways to tell the same tale.
All right, that's the deep of Pancho and Lefty. If this episode left you wanting more, do us a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a comment with your favorite line from the song, and tell us which country song you want us to break down next. We read every suggestion.
And if you enjoyed the details, the credits, the studio stories, the music notes, share this episode with a friend who loves songwriting. It helps the show grow and brings more ears to these songs that deserve the deep dive.
This has been Ranch Beat. Every country song has a story, and we tell it. I'm James.
And I'm Sam. See you next time.